Bob Ackerman, the editor-in-chief of Signal Magazine, and welcome to our Signal Media Executive Interview. Our guest today is Jon Green, Chief Security Officer for Aruba, a Hewlett-Packard Enterprise company. Jon, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
Your firm recently received an Authorized designation from the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, FedRAMP, for your cloud-native network operations and analytics platform. Why is that significant?
It's significant because the way that the federal government's been doing network management for years and years and years is really hasn't changed much since the 90s. It's been on-premise network management appliances and network management software that the end customer has managed and maintained themselves, and had to deal with all the problems that go along with that, applying patches, worrying about scalability and that sort of thing. And so with the FedRAMP authorization, a lot of our customers in the commercial sector have been moving into cloud-based network management for their network operations. And now this authorization allows federal government customers to receive the same benefits. So all of those kind of disadvantages of having to do on-premise maintenance disappear with that, because it's now our problem to solve.
So what does this mean, though, for federal agencies?
FedRAMP has been an evolving program, and I'll say candidly, I think a lot of agencies still don't really understand how to take advantage of it. But it changed the accreditation model for how services can be consumed. But the idea, to put it in summary, the idea being one agency goes through an ATO, authorization to operate, and other agencies can then take advantage of that same ATO. So being authorized on the FedRAMP marketplace says basically, hey, that ATO has been achieved, and now if I'm another agency that wants to adopt that same solution, the accreditation bar is set much lower in terms of the work that I have to do as an agency to get that solution accredited.
Well, speaking of that, what does a company have to do to obtain this FedRAMP authorization?
It is not easy. And I don't think we understood going into it just how much work it was going to be. So it's been eye-opening on that. The federal government, the FedRAMP Program Management Office, takes this pretty seriously. And so there is no kind of paperwork exercise by which you can say, yeah, that control over there, we implement it and hand wave it away. They're pretty serious about making sure that things are enforced, and the requirements changed along the way. Especially 2021, after the SolarWinds incident and a few other well-publicized security incidents, the FedRAMP PMO actually came back and said, hey, these requirements that used to be optional requirements, we just made them mandatory. And so that set us back a little bit, but all good things that they made us go through. The approach that we took on this was to go out and hire they call them a 3PAO. I couldn't tell you what that stands for at the moment, but basically the auditing firm that is authorized to do audits under FedRAMP. We hired one of those firms to be an advisory firm, and they kind of went through and looked at our cloud service offering and said, hey, these are all the gaps that you have between how you've already deployed and what's required for FedRAMP. And then they worked with us on a plan and a roadmap to get those gaps addressed. We then hired another 3PAO to be the actual auditor. And so it was about 2 years worth of work, and it was it's a pretty significant effort. Things like, there are virtual machines that run in Amazon Web Services for our service offering. Those were based on some Linux distribution, and it turned out we can't use that Linux distribution. It didn't have FIPS approved cryptography in it. It didn't have the necessary approvals. So we had to kind of spin up a whole other service with a different basis for what those Linux distributions looked like. So It's all a lot of detailed work and a lot of very specific, meet this requirement, meet that requirement, all based on public frameworks. It's all NIST, 853 that we have to comply with, and a selected set of controls that come out of 853. But it's a lot of digging through this specific requirement and what does this mean, and how does that impact our services? How does that impact maybe third-party services that we're bringing in to offer that? So again, about 2 years easily worth of work with probably 5 people on the core team working on that, and then a whole lot of involvement from our DevOps team, from our developers and software engineering teams.
You mentioned the Linux distributions, I think it was. What other surprises did you encounter that forced you to wheel about and take different courses in order to meet the criteria?
I think the biggest one was probably, which came at the very end. I mentioned changing requirements, encryption between components of the service, basically TLS encryption over the network. That became a mandatory requirement, and we kind of looked at that at the beginning and said, when we're operating on virtual machines inside AWS, the encryption is not something that we thought was necessary, just because if an attacker is in there to monitor network communications, they're already in the environment pretty deeply with kind of administrative rights. And so doing encryption between workloads doesn't really buy us very much. And the FedRAMP PMO said, nope, you gotta do this. And I think part of their logic was, yes, it's okay if it's running that way today, but what if you change something tomorrow and put this in a different region, or make this service an on-premise service, or what have you? So if encryption is kind of a native part of the design between components, then you don't have to worry about that, and we don't have to worry about things suddenly becoming non-compliant when you shift it around. So that was one of the bigger surprises. There are ways to get that with AWS. They have kind of native encryption services that they offer. You got to pay more for that. But getting encryption between workloads running inside the same virtual private cloud in AWS is achievable. And then we have to, we had to make changes. There were changes to where we run the workloads to achieve that. There are also some types of workloads where we had to just turn on TLS encryption over the network in addition. So we pushed back against that a little bit at the beginning because we thought it was kind of unnecessary. But after understanding the logic, it seemed to make a little bit more sense. That was probably one of the bigger surprises, and one of the things that kind of set us back time-wise because we thought we were ready to go a year ago. And that one came up and said, "Oh, we got to go back to the drawing board on some of these things."
Interesting. Okay, but you got your authorization. Now, how do federal agencies benefit from using a cloud-native network operations and analytics platform?
Yeah, so and this is one of those things that I think will take a little bit of time for people to adapt to. The rise of cloud services within the federal government has been fairly slow from what we've seen. And I think network, application teams are probably at the forefront of saying, hey, there's some software as a service out there. Microsoft 365 being one of the bigger ones that I've seen the federal government say, okay, we're ready to adopt that. That's well understood. The network teams kind of have, because of the nature of what they do, networks are on premise and in buildings and wide area networks and these sorts of things. They haven't thought as much about consuming a service from the cloud to help with their network management. So we've got a selling task ahead of us to just make people aware of what that's all about. I think one of the biggest advantages is going to be for large organizations. If I look at the Pentagon as an example, where we're now the wireless vendor, the wired vendor for NIPRNet, and the wired network for SIPRNet. That's a massive office building, and it was a challenge for us to get our existing network management solution to scale up to the requirements that they had. The number of Wi-Fi access points just in the Pentagon, it's a lot. And so what a cloud service allows them to do, and the big benefit they get is they don't need to worry about scalability anymore. We've built the system so that it's horizontally scalable, so that if we need more capacity, we simply spin up more virtual machines in AWS, we spin up additional database nodes and so on, and it scales effectively infinitely. But the customer doesn't have to worry about that. We take care of that problem. We monitor load and that sort of thing. And we essentially have unlimited scalability. There's a limit somewhere, right? But effectively it's unlimited. That's, I think, the biggest advantage that they're going to get out of a cloud consumed of service is making somebody else worry about that. The other thing is security patches. Part of my organization that reports to me handles product security advisories and vulnerability management within our on-prem products. And we issue advisories, not frequently, but frequently enough. And it's always surprising to me when we go out and look and see, hey, we put out these patches, we put out an advisory of a vulnerability. How many customers are still running software that's vulnerable, that's known to be vulnerable? It's a huge challenge for our customers to apply patches, to get maintenance windows to apply patches and this sort of thing. There's also an additional hurdle within federal government of certification and accreditation. There is a mindset that says this version of software is FIPS validated and went through common criteria, and it's on the DoDN APL and so on and so forth. And therefore, that's the version we have to run, even if there's known security vulnerabilities. That's not the position of kind of the authorities, but that that mindset still trickles down. And we've heard that more than once of, I can't upgrade my software until you recertify the new version. With a cloud consumed service, again, that issue goes away. We are responsible for applying security patches and maintaining the security status of that product and that service. And so security updates just happen. A customer doesn't need to do anything. It's just there. So I think those are the two biggest benefits that people are going to see out of consuming it as a service instead of deploying an appliance in a data center.
Okay, then. Well, Jon, any final thoughts on your company and this service to its federal customers?
Just that we've been in this world of federal government for a long time now. I was involved in the very first accreditation for the U.S. Air Force when we deployed Wi-Fi way back when, and we've had a continuing commitment to that market. It's challenging to keep up with changing requirements and changing rules and changing certifications, but we believe in it. We've got a large team to support that effort. And it's something that we're going to keep on doing. Now, as we transition into cloud-based management, the question comes up, well, are you abandoning the old way of doing things? And the answer to that is no. Federal customers, especially in DoD, are going to be on probably an extended timeline for a transition from on-premise services to consumed software as a service. We're not going to force them before they're ready. We're not discontinuing products. We're not kind of forcing them to make that move. So we'll continue to kind of exist in both worlds for probably a pretty long time.
Okay. Well, Jon, I want to thank you for your insight and very candid observations.
Absolutely.
To the audience, I want to thank you for viewing. This has been a Signal Media executive video sponsored by Aruba, a Hewlett-Packard Enterprise company. Good day.